it's not a rush. So, okay, full time. Thank you so much.
Okay, everybody, we've got the water bottle gavel today. Welcome to the Transportation Committee on Friday, April 17th, 2026. I'd like to start by asking the interpreters to explain how to access our interpretation services. Please go ahead.
Good morning. Announcement from the interpreter. To use the interpretation feature, please scroll to the bottom of the Zoom screen where the meeting controls are. Click on the interpretation icon world and select English as your language. If you're joining through the Zoom mobile app, cell phone, tablet, etc., please press ellipsis, then interpretation, and then choose your language. Finally, click on mute original audio to not hear the original Spanish flow in the background. Headsets are available for interpretation. If you're in the meeting room, please check out a headset from the receptionist in the lobby. Buenos días. Aviso por parte del intérprete. Para hacer uso del servicio de interpretación, favor desplazarse a la parte inferior de la pantalla de Zoom, donde aparecen los controles. Haga clic en el icono de interpretación y seleccione Spanish. Si está utilizando la aplicación móvil de Zoom, celular, tableta, etc., presione los puntos suspensivos, luego interpretación y luego el idioma. Si no desea escuchar el audio original en inglés en el fondo, por favor seleccione Mute Original Audio, silenciar audio original. Contamos con auriculares disponibles para el servicio de interpretación. Si se encuentra en la sala de reunión, favor para pedir auriculares con la recepcionista en el vestíbulo. Gracias. Thank you.
Thank you. I would like to take a moment to acknowledge the land that we call home. The tribal nations of the San Diego region have historically faced injustices. We acknowledge the harmony that existed between the land, nature, and its original peoples who have since endured displacement, persecution, and systemic oppression. We pay our respect to the unceded territory and homelands of the 18 tribal nations in our region, the most in any county in the United States. From 4 cultural groups, the Kumaya, the Genyo, the Losueño, the Copueño, and the Cahuilla. This land has nourished, healed, protected, and embraced them for many generations in a relationship of balance and harmony. As members of the SANDAG community, we acknowledge this legacy. We aspire to learn from indigenous traditional knowledge and experiences in undoing the injustices of the past. Please join me in the pledge. Ready? Begin.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Francesca, can you confirm we have a quorum?
Thank you, Chair. We do have a quorum.
Great, thank you. So we're going to move into the agenda now. The first item is non-agenda public comments. I've asked, for people's planning purposes, I've asked the clerk to give 2 minutes per speaker on agenda items with the exception of consent today. We'll have 1 minute on consent. With that, Francesca, can you call any speakers for non-agenda public comments?
Yes, thank you. We have, let's see, 5 public speakers. We'll start with Purita Javier and then Cesar Javier.
Good morning. I am Purita Javier, victim of ceramics kiln toxicity since 1997. I will read to you the response of our District 9 commuter Elo Rivera. No, the stock councilor Elo Rivera. Dear Cesar, thank you for reaching out to my office regarding your continued concerns over the air quality in your neighborhood and the Perry next to your residence. We've reached out to the city's code enforcement department and county's air pollution control district who found no violations of either air quality standard or city code. I answered you. You are interested in pursuing answer any questions about the process of updating city codes. He can be contacted at 619-533.
Thank you very much. Your time has expired. Our next speaker will be Cesar Javier, followed by Arun Prem.
It's time.
For as long as we breathe, we will contribute. We will help. We will help ourselves and our neighbor. We will help our elected officials, 11 elected officials, City of San Diego. All these inputs here by Mr. Rivera are all but scratches on the surface. He is one of the governing board of the Air Pollution Control District, along with the mayor. He is our number one homeowner, shall we say, leadership. They know the environmental hazards, but they seem not to appreciate. They seem not to understand. They seem not, or shall we say, they ignore it. They neglect it. And with our observation, this is the same phenomena, how they neglect, ignore the sick and dying people, District 8, San Isidro, and its neighboring Imperial Beach City. Pardon us, we just wanted to live longer. This environmental hazards is an unseen enemy. The one you touch, the one you inhale, the one you ingest are the silent killers. I know our relatives, our loved ones are sick. One thing sure.
Thank you. Your time has expired. Our next speaker will be Arun Prem. After Arun, we'll go online and start with Griselda Ramirez.
Good morning, everyone. Arun Prem, representing FACT. Earlier this week, the California Association of Coordinated Transportation, CalACT, held their spring conference in the Riverside area. This association represents transit and coordinated transit and nonprofit agencies across the state. And along with CTA, the California Transit Association is one of the two major transit associations in California. I'm very pleased to share this update with you. FACT was recognized during CalACT as the Outstanding Transportation Agency for 2026. This award is presented annually based on a statewide review. This was in recognition of FACT's Access for All program, which we implemented with SANDAG and CPUC funds in December of last year. It provides on-demand transportation. We provide service with a response time of less than an hour, including accessible transportation across San Diego County. And very proud to report that the program is meeting its objectives. We're providing trips below cost and meeting this critical need for on-demand accessible transportation in San Diego County. And this program is funded through December, and I look forward to bringing you more positive updates. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker will be Griselda Ramirez, followed by Blair Beekman. Griselda, you can go ahead. Griselda, you are self-muted at the moment.
Oh, sorry about that. Can you hear me now?
Yes, thank you.
Griselda Ramirez here with California Consulting, the state's largest grant writing company. Today, we would like to introduce you to California Consulting and our work. California Consulting has been in existence for 22 years. Our grant writers have written over 1,700 grant applications that have been funded for our clients. We have over 250 clients across the state, composed of cities, counties, school districts, special districts, and other public agencies. Our clients in the region, in San Diego region, include County of San Diego and the city of El Cajon, as well as Lemon Grove School District. We're exclusively a grant writing company and are not lobbyists. We primarily write large federal and state grant applications. Our team also conducts grant reporting and grant administration and post-award compliance for federal and state grants. We work on grants for public works, police, fire, parks, recreation, community development, economic development, and many other areas, including transportation. So Roland is actually there, and we're here locally in San Diego, and we'll pass. Roland will be passing out information. Please do not hesitate to contact us if we could be of service for any of your cities. Thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you. Our next speaker will be Blair Beekman. You can go ahead.
Hi, Blair Beekman. Happy Friday, everyone. My two big concerns this week, as usual, I'm trying to better and better say, the importance of ARGIS issues, how we can work on ARGIS issues here. Thank you. There's going to be an ARGIS item at the afternoon public safety meeting. You guys can very nicely work on ARGIS issues and make it a public meeting process from time to time. You go through a few weeks and a month at a time of going through ARGIS issues, and it's really nice when you do that. We seem to be in that cycle and rhythm right now, and I hope we are really talking about the future of ARGIS data collection, what exactly that entails. I've tried to describe many times, that there's something called Jayhawks. I think it is the San Diego Law Enforcement Data Collection Center also. I think those are its two names. But those two groups, I mean, they're seriously heavy-duty data collection, law enforcement stuff. And if they got the heavy lift and the heavy load, what does that make ARGIS? And what can we talk about to make sure that we've got best practices going on? So good luck in those efforts, what that can develop at this time, how we can be thinking about ARGIS, working off the other things, making those conversations open and clear and not secretive. And not like we're at death's door of national security. We're at a time of war. If we talk about things openly and offer our best practices, those are the practices of best reasoning and peace, basically. So good luck in that effort. And please work on the fare raising issues. They want to raise fares by $5 for monthly passes to people who have low income and fixed income and SSI. Is that crazy? What's up? That's really wrong. You guys got to work on $2 incremental things, maybe, that's much more realistic. Thank you.
Thank you. Our final speaker will be the original draw. You can go ahead.
Well, the Great Reset is upon us. The New World Order is coming in hot, and I just want to give you guys a gold star for your part in that, for all that you guys have done to help implement it and continue it going, right? Pricing people out of the cost of living, getting people out of their cars. And, just really unable to do stuff. Most of people are going to be losing their jobs and probably their home because they can't afford anything anymore. So, I mean, you guys have really done a great job in, raising the cost of living and just really making things hard for people. So good job for your implementation of all of those things. I mean, because it's like crazy. I mean, parents used to be able to help out their kids and now they need help. right? All these people are needing to go into those, socialist programs and stuff like that. So it's so interesting to see how everything's played out. It's like people are like, man, I'm going to have to sell my car, I mean, and you guys have, wanted that to happen. I mean, you really wanted to change people's behaviors so that they do get out of their car. So, I mean, it's working what you guys are doing. And, along with the other governmental entities and stuff like that, everybody has their part. But I mean, you guys have really adamantly been working on this for so long, right? Like decades, and it's finally coming into fruition. And it's pretty cool to look at, right? I mean, look at all the homeless people out on the streets and like think about how many more are going to be homeless, especially children, right? But I mean, at least they can ride the bus for free. So that's cool. You kind of give them a little bit of like, incentives here and there to make it think like you really care about them. So I mean, just like you guys should really give yourselves a pat on the back for what you've been doing. Good job.
That concludes the public comments.
Thank you. For member comments, I'll start with something a bit near and dear to my heart, being one of the former chairs of the audit committee. But as you're all aware, the audit committee, the auditor runs their work based upon a plan that's created every year. And one of the key inputs to the audit plan is doing a risk assessment of the agency. This year, for the first time through an online survey, the independent performance auditor is providing an opportunity for the public to share what high-risk areas of SANDAG they would like to see audited by OIPA in the coming year. Up on the screen, we have how to take that audit. There's a QR code. You can scan the QR code and take the online survey. It just takes a few minutes and will be open to the public through next Friday, April 24th. So please go ahead and take a scan if you're interested in doing that survey. With that, we'll go ahead and move on to the agency update from Mario.
Thank you, Chair. As a lot of you may be aware, yesterday, MTS and North County Transit District Boards voted to approve fare increases recommendations for this committee to consider. As you are aware, the SANDAG Board has delegated the authority to this committee, the Transportation Committee, to amend the regional fare ordinance. The reading of the ordinance must take place twice, and it will occur next month in May, and the final vote will be taken in June. So that on that item, just putting it out there so you have it in your schedules and for your consideration. We had last week a trip to Sacramento. It's very big step as we have been working on the reform of SB 375 between the four major MPOs in the state, the SCAC, which represents the Inland Empire, LA area, Imperial County, SANDAG, the Bay Area MPO, and Sacramento MPO. SB 375 talks about the sustainable communities approach, the targets for greenhouse emissions, and several requirements. So we have been bringing up that legislation is now getting close to almost 20 years. It's around 18 years. There's some very good things that have happened with that legislation, and there are areas of opportunity. And therefore, we have brought that up. Senator Cabaldom initiated some of our ideas through a bill, Senate Bill 1087. I'm pretty happy that that bill went through the Environmental Committee of the Senate. So now it's moving to the Transportation Committee for their recommendation to continue to eventually go to the floor vote. So there's a lot of amendments, things happening, negotiations, a lot of engagement, but we're very, very happy how all that is going on. I'm also happy to inform that last week, so this week we'll be going to that Transportation Committee. On the Environmental Committee, Antoinette was the one who testified. For Transportation Committee, SCAG, no, the Bay Area and Sacramento will be the ones testifying on behalf of the bill. We met last week also with the Deputy Secretary of Cali, PA, regarding border and tribal affairs, but he shared the important funding opportunity that will be coming up through the Plastic Pollution Act. We will be bringing some more discussions forward to see how we can help direct some funding to our region and maybe deal with our resiliency issues. It's a very large fund. It's 10 years. It was based on a settlement with different companies. Its total is $5 billion, so it'll be $500 million each year for 10 years. Hopefully, it'll bring some grant opportunities for the region. This is very important. The border resiliency plan that we're doing with Caltrans is looking at the border area and how climate change and other factors affect the border area on both sides. But it goes a little bit broader in this opportunity of funding on dealing with how we would deal with plastics and solid waste either on the Tijuana River, on lagoon restorations, or other habitats. So this is a very important opportunity. We also brought up to the Deputy Secretary that we're working on the update on Cal Enviro screen for our community so they are appropriately represented. Some project updates. Today is the deadline to provide feedback for flexible fleet grant program for the active transportation program. Sorry about that. And so we hope that people can provide us some feedback on that. It's a call for projects is out for the fleet grant program. We will be having some webinars regarding this. And we're also working on some reconnecting community events. And this was based on a grant that we received from Caltrans. Please go and check on on our web pages on updates on the Batiquitos Lagoon double track project and the San Dieguito double track. We will be having some pause in service there due to the pause on the project due to the nesting season. So we will be stopping the project there, and we will also be having utilities identified on the double track project. So you will be seeing some movement there. That concludes my update, sir.
Thank you. Do I have any member updates? Go ahead, Councilmember Mendoza.
This week I had the pleasure of attending the Reconnecting Communities workshop in Lemon Grove, and we had a packed house. It was standing room only. So people are, our community is super excited about the project. So thank you for coming out. Yeah.
Councilmember Edson.
Thank you, Chair. As Mario touched upon, following robust discussion, yesterday the Board of NCTD unanimously voted to forward a recommendation to SANDAG to make the changes to the Regional Comprehensive Fare Ordinance outlined in Attachment A of our Agenda Item 16. These proposed changes align with those approved by the Board of MTS. Further, and as part of the same motion, the Board of NCTD unanimously approved sending a letter to SANDAG advocating for the study of a low-income fare program. Increasing fares is difficult even at the best of times. In consideration of our riders, especially our transit-dependent and lower-income riders, NCTD has not raised monthly fares since 2008. Since that time, the economic ups and downs of the Great Recession, COVID pandemic, and post-pandemic inflation surge also played a part in the decision to continue to maintain lower fares. However, during the 18 years since NCTD's last monthly fare increase, both capital and operations costs have dramatically increased. And in the present economic climate, funding for public transportation from all sources, federal, state, and local, especially when it comes to operations dollars, each present their own challenges. Over the past few years, the board and staff of NCTD have been proactive and taken necessary and appropriate steps in order to keep fares low. We've cut the fat. Operating costs have been reduced by $10 million, bus routes have been streamlined, and staff diligently seek grant funding opportunities whenever and wherever possible. NCTD is continuing to explore a variety of strategies to close our upcoming funding gap. Although fare revenue only represents approximately 7% of NCTD's operating budget, it remains a key source of our transit service funding. The recommended changes to the Comprehensive Regional Fare Ordinance are essential. Fare revenue provides unconstrained, flexible funding to use toward essential operations costs. NCTD, MTS, and SANDAG staff have worked collaboratively and invested a great deal of time and effort into crafting the proposed regional fare changes. NCTD staff performed robust public outreach, listened to and incorporated feedback from our writers, our employees, and from board members. These efforts culminated in our board's unanimous decision yesterday to recommend that SANDAG make the proposed changes to the Regional Comprehensive Fare Ordinance, and further, that SANDAG consider the study of a low-income fare program. Board discussion was very clear. We do not want our low-income riders left behind. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other member comments? Seeing none, we will move on to the consent agenda. For those public speakers, please keep your comments focused on topics on the consent agenda. Francesca, can you call any public speakers?
Thank you, Chair. If you're a member of the public online who'd like to speak on consent, please raise your hand now. I will start with Cesar Javier and then go to the original draw.
You will hear us for as long as we breathe. Thank you, SANDAG. Minutes. The reflections of the product of thinkers yesterday. We wish, as San Diegans on our twilight years, a dream of governance which reflect the delivery of public good, not only on mobility and transportation or circulation or communication, but something else underneath, on its side, on its top. 3.2 and 3.3, these are policy making and implementation. Well done. The process is good, better, best, but something is missing. From the point of view of survivalist, what is...
Thank you. Your time has expired. Our next speaker will be the original draw, followed by Blair Beekman.
With your TDA amendments, it just further proves your fraud, waste, and abuse because you're like this money was allocated. You guys have to come forward and make amendments because the money that was allocated is now needing to be used for something else. And you guys continually do this. You shuffle money around. You know, you plan on something and it's like, I mean, you guys just love money because you'll come in and, I mean, you have no problems getting it, Mario, so don't worry, you're going to get all that grant money. You guys are just fantastic at that. But you don't do what you're supposed to with it. And you also engage in, you know, and with entities and contracts that are, you know, you shouldn't be, that have, you know, litigation coming forward and different things. So it's ridiculous that we have to come forward and make these amendments. I mean, and that you guys can't, you know, stay to what you had planned to do. And this happens on a regular basis. And it just, again, further proves your fraud, waste, and abuse.
I think our final speaker will be Blair Beekman. You can go ahead.
Hi, Blair Beekman. To speak to the meeting minutes from last time, you had an item about dealing with the fare increase issues. Thank you for the previous report out, what to expect coming up. I didn't know there was a low-cost low-income program if you're going to be raising these fares. I still think it's just much easier to start at a $2 range instead of a $5. Kind of what DRA said, you're making people go through more hurdles. That is understandable, and you guys get extra money, but it's just a pain in the behind to go through all of that. And I think people would much more trust you with just a $2 raise than having to go through more and more hurdles. You know, so good luck in reviewing it, and please take your time with it. Please don't rush this. Please, if it needs more time, please allow that. There's California state funding also we can get.
Thank you. Your time has expired. That concludes the public comments.
Thank you. Do I have any member comments or questions? Seeing none, I'd entertain a motion to approve the consent calendar.
I make motion that we approve the consent calendar as stated.
Moved by
I'll second.
Fleming, second by Jennifer Mendoza. Please vote.
That motion passes unanimously with those members present.
Great, thank you. We'll now move on to the first regular agenda item, which is the Independent Taxpayer Oversight Committee report on initial findings. And I'll turn this over to Marcus.
Thank you, Chair. I'll actually have the Chair of ITALK kick off this item.
Good morning, Chair Zito and members of the Transportation Committee. My name is Francisco Rivera and I'm the ITALK Chair. The ITALK has the responsibility to conduct annual fiscal and compliance audits for all agencies receiving Transnet dollars. The Transnet fiscal and compliance audits have been conducted for the period of July 1st, 2024 to June 30th, 2025. These audits are performed annually to assist the ITALK in providing oversight for the expenditure of funds under the Transnet Extension Ordinance. At our meeting on April 8th, the ITALK reviewed and accepted the auditor's summary of results and the fiscal year 2025 draft audit reports, including findings and recommendations. The audits went smoothly and the cities, county, and transit agencies were largely in compliance. We commend the agencies on these efforts. Draft audit reports for all cities were provided at the ITALK meeting. Before we finalize the audit report, it is required that we share our initial audit results with the Transportation Committee, whose role is to review for any inconsistencies or technical issues. I am joined today by Kyle Haas of Davis Farr LLP, which is a firm that conducted the fiscal year 2025 audit on behalf of the ITALK. Kyle will share an overview of the initial findings and recommendations of the audit. At the end of their presentation, Kyle will turn it over to SANDAG staff, Marcus Pasquale, who will cover the next steps in the audit process and address any comments provided by ITALK. I am available to answer any questions you may have. Thank you. Go ahead, Kyle.
Thank you so much. And thank you to the committee for having us to present these findings. This, again, is a presentation of results of the Transnet and Transnet Extension activities for the fiscal year ended June 30th, 2025. So the scope of the engagement were agreed upon procedures to determine if the recipients of Transnet funds were in compliance with the ordinance for that year ended June 30th, 2025, the procedures of which were approved by the ITALK in July of 2025. We reviewed 24 recipient agencies during the period of performance of September 2025 through February 2026. And we have the results of 8 major compliance components for you. The first of which is our Transnet expenditures. We selected at least 25% of total expenditures incurred for each agency. We tested payroll charges if those payroll charges exceeded 20% of total Transnet expenditures for each agency. We do want to note that all recipients were in compliance with the revenue and expenditure requirements. The second area was the maintenance of effort. All recipients were in compliance with the maintenance of effort or MO requirements. The re-indexing effort, which occurred in fiscal year ended June 30, 2024, did have two agencies that had not completed their ACFRs by the time in which we needed to issue the reports in the prior year. So we presented the results of the reindexing efforts for the cities of La Mesa and National City this year. The third was the local agency balance limitation, or the 30% rule. All recipients were in compliance with the 30% rule except the city of Lemon Grove. Lemon Grove had or their annual apportionment was 304,000. Their ending balance of projects that are currently on their Schedule A was 813,000. So they were around 509,000 over the limit. That is not considered a finding, by the way. That is just the rule in which they will just need to spend down that balance before they can request additional funds. Numbers 4 and 5 for the local street improvements, congestion relief versus maintenance. All recipients are in compliance with the requirements that at least 70% of revenues were used for congestion relief. And all recipient agencies are in compliance with the requirement not to spend more than 30% of funds for maintenance. As far as indirect costs go, 12 agencies did charge indirect costs to the program. There were no findings for indirect costs. However, we did note that the city of San Diego, Caltrans, and the county of San Diego exceeded 10%. This is primarily due to the use of in-house engineers and staff on projects, as opposed to some agencies which do outsource those functions. This is just the second table there. Continuing on. We did see that it's mostly consistent from the prior year as far as the percentage of indirect costs spent as a total or as compared to the total Transnet expenditures for the agencies. The seventh area was the Regional Transportation Congestion Improvement Program, or RTCIP. All agencies were in compliance with the exaction fee collection requirements, with the exceptions of the city of Encinitas and the city of National City, which did not collect the required $2,875.06 per exaction. We did note that there were exceptions in the prior year for the cities of Coronado and the county of San Diego. However, those exceptions did not recur in the current fiscal year and had been remedied by the time we were ready to release our report. The agencies did expend or commit funds within 7 years as required. So there was no issue with that as well. Transit operator eligibility, which is the 8th area that we took a look at. The increase in operating costs per revenue vehicle hour for bus services cannot exceed the increase in CPI. In this case, both MTS and NCTD did not meet this requirement. Also, the increase in operating costs per revenue vehicle hour for rail services cannot exceed the increase in CPI. We again noted that MTS and NCTD did not meet this requirement. That is actually all that I had. I thank you all for your time, and I'll go ahead and pass it over to Marcus this time.
Thank you, Kyle. I'm Marcus Pasquale with SANDAG staff. Before going on to the next steps, I'd like to speak on improvements to reduce findings in the future, especially related to recurring exaction fee findings. This year was relatively clean and shows improvement, reducing findings from last year from 7 to 4. However, we still had exaction fee findings related to National City and Encinitas. To reduce these specific findings, we are getting confirmation from each city that they are using the correct fees as part of the RTCIP submittal process. Additionally, we are increasing our reminders to the city's finance departments and plan to communicate the updated fees at the city managers meeting. And at this point, I will now go over the next steps. Per the ordinance, ITALK is required to have at least 60 days from today's Transportation Committee meeting to finalize the audit reports. The 60 days provides time to resolve any inconsistencies and technical issues related to the ITALK draft report and recommendations, such as the request in item 5, the next item. The soonest possible date for ITALK to approve the final results is July 8th. After ITALK approval on that date, the results of the audit will be included in the ITALK's Transnet annual report scheduled to go to the Board of Directors meeting on July 24th. That will conclude this audit report item.
Thank you for that. We will start out with public speakers. Francesca, do we have any public comment on this item?
Thank you, Chair. We have 3 public speakers on this item. I'll start with Cesar Javier and then the original draft.
Every single cent spent not on the right perspective impacts health and safety of humans. You mentioned about deviation of the city as far as services in-house, meaning organic services of the city. It's wrong as far as your description. What sanction now? 3 months, 4 months to correct it? Is that morally a sanction, or there must be something else that we would like to clarify? Because, as I've said, a drop of cent spent for something wrong is the survival of humans. City of San Diego, you have observed, you have heard what's going on as far as survivability of San Diego, City of San Diego. I am not hateful. We are not hateful. We represent 77 signatories in our quest to find solution. We represent them, and we will give feedback to them that this is what's going on in our city governance. Thank you for your presentation. It gives us spirit to help our city elected officials to do something approaching good, not the bad and ugly going on. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker will be the original draw, followed by Blair Beekman.
So interesting to see the powers that shouldn't be using data to make it seem like you're doing your job. And, you're following ordinances and policies, you're doing what needs to be done, what was set in place to deal with this amount of money. And it's just interesting because you guys always try and paint a really pretty picture, like, all of the powers that shouldn't be. And, people buy it. So it seems like, what you're really doing is good. You guys are, you're following the rules and stuff. But I'm just wondering when, at any point, if you were ever planning on following like the U.S. Constitution or the state constitutions in that way, the ones that you supposedly took an oath to and, want to uphold, and, the way you say the Pledge of Allegiance and stuff like that. I mean, when are we going to start treating things not just like data collection and use of it to paint a picture, but actually, look at the people suffering, whose money you're taking, who you could be actually making our lives better. Like, why in other countries that have less money than us do they look beautiful? Their transit system is beautiful. They want to walk around because it's beautiful. They're not being forced into some kind of, New World Order and Great Reset that you guys have been pushing that you're not even understanding. Which I don't even understand how you can. It's coming from the United Nations and we're here. But it's like, it could actually really work if you guys concentrated on actually providing the things that need to be provided, not just giving a bunch of minutia and busy work to make it seem like you're doing a good job, because all we have to do is look at the world around us. So it's just sad to see that like we could have so much more and you guys just choose not to do that.
Our final speaker on this item will be Blair Beekman. You can go ahead.
Hi, thank you, Blair Beekman. Thank you for this item. You're having many of these sort of my phone is dropping. Transnet items today. I just dropped my phone. Sorry about that. My question from the meeting yesterday, the MTS meeting, it was spoken in public comment time on fair raising issues. What can be different ways to be thinking about money for MTS? State funding is one way that was suggested from the public. Another idea suggested that was very much respected by committee members, by the way. Another idea that was mentioned was the malleability of the Transnet Committee overall, of the Transnet funding and its goals and intentions and purpose, and how some of that money can be used for MTS concerns. And so good luck at how this auditing item can begin a process of how to talk about that more regularly for ourselves. And it can be an open, clear conversation, how to do that through good auditing practices that I'm trusting Mario can know how to work really well and respectfully. And it's important. How we find funding needs is really important. I've been saying this for months here at SANDAG, that, I thank you that you are considering fair raising before cuts in service. That's not going to happen. So it sounds like you have a good approach. People are agreeing to the approach. I just hope you can take things a bit more slowly and we can have an extra 6 months to work on this if possible. I know you guys have financial concerns right away. I hope that can be put off 6 months and we can really work.
Thank you. Your time has expired. That concludes the public comments.
Thank you. Do we have any board member questions or comments on the report? Committee members? Seeing none, clearly you guys did an excellent job. Thanks for the report. I do have one question, which was you mentioned that last year the exceptions to the exactions were corrected. Do we expect that to happen again? Is that a normal part of the process?
Yeah, we do work with the cities on our recommendations on how to clear those exceptions in the following year. And it's been our experience that once we do communicate those exceptions, they are remedied in one way or another. And we should see those go away next year.
Okay, great. Thanks. And
Sure.
yeah, I appreciate the comments that you made, Marcus, about adding information to the city manager meeting and making sure that they're staying on top of this, and hopefully it'll happen less in the future. And Chair Rivera, appreciate all your effort in this space. It was a very nice summary. Thank you for that.
Thank you very much.
Seeing no other comments, we'll move on to item number 5, which is the Transnet Extension Ordinance Funding Eligibility Request. Marcus, looks like you get this one too. Or maybe it's going to Kimberly. I don't know.
They're there to back up.
Okay.
We need a full team for this one today. Good morning, Kimberly Trammell. I'm the SANDAG's Director of Accounting and Finance. So the item we're discussing today is the Transnet Operator Eligibility Funding Requests. And with me, in addition to the team from the last item, we also have Susan Huntington joining us to add to her valuable history to the discussion. So I do want to start off letting the committee know that we had a last minute change to this item that is impacting the staff recommendation as published. We'll explain this change as we go through the presentation and make sure that the recommendation at the end is very clear to the committee. The item follows the draft ITALK audit report presented in item 4 because it addresses the 2 operator eligibility findings identified in the report. The findings are based on the fiscal year 25 operating cost increases for MTS and NCTD, exceeding the change in consumer price index for CPI. The Transnet ordinance allows for these findings to be resolved before the final audit is issued if the board approves the request from the transit operators to calculate the requirement differently. That's the item before you now. The audit checks for compliance with Section 4C5 of the Transnet ordinance, which requires that year-over-year increases in operator costs per revenue vehicle hour for bus and per revenue vehicle mile for rail service not exceed the increase in the consumer price index for San Diego County. The CPI increased, consumer price index CPI, for 25 was 3.71%. Both operators exceeded the CPI growth for both bus and rail operating costs. As previously discussed with this committee, both transit operators are facing escalating costs and projecting future funding gaps. For MTS, their change in operating costs per revenue vehicle hours for bus services was 5.29%. And revenue vehicle miles for rail service increased 9.1%. NCTD results are similar with 4.83% increases in the cost per revenue vehicle hours for bus services and 9.34% in cost per revenue vehicle mile for rail. The Transnet ordinance includes language that allows for exceptions to this funding eligibility requirement. Before you is the ordinance language, which states that if there are unusual circumstances and events beyond the operator's control, the operator may request approval of the commission, i.e. the board, to calculate the requirements differently. The ordinance gives 2 alternative calculations. Use CPI growth averaged over 3 previous years, or exclude from the calculation certain cost increases that were due to external events already entirely beyond the operator's control. This year, MCS and NCTD are requesting exceptions for the CPI funding requirement for both rail and bus services as described in their letters attached to this item. NCTD elected to use the cost exclusion calculation for both bus and rail. MTS used the cost exclusion calculation for bus services and proposed to convert to a cost of operations per revenue train hour. So that's the little distinction, per mile or per hour, instead of the revenue vehicle mile. Upon further review of MTS's request letter, we determined that the methodology proposed to comply with the eligibility requirement is not something that's allowed within the Transnet ordinance. Other programs that we administer, such as TDA, will allow a per mile calculation, but the Transnet language does not currently have this flexibility. Unfortunately, we didn't check the proposal against the ordinance language until earlier this week. We should have identified this inconsistency with the ordinance sooner, which may have provided MTS more time to revise their request letter. Since the request is inconsistent with the ordinance, the recommended action for this item has changed. We continue to recommend the request for NCTD and are not recommending approval of the request for MTS as it relates to rail operations. As a process following the review by ITALK, which was last week, and TC, the board will be asked to consider the funding eligibility request with MTS's rail request as an exception. If the board approves the request, what happens is the initial findings in the audit report will be resolved. I'm going to now turn it over to Marcus to go into a few more details about the ITALK review of this item.
The regularity of these requests for exceptions has led to questions around whether CPI growth is the appropriate bar for funding eligibility. We pulled the historical data on how frequently the draft audit reports found the operators were out of compliance with the CPI requirement. This slide shows the last 16 years for both operators. They have only 2 years when both MTS and NCTD have met the requirement for both bus and rail. Bus cost increases have been above CPI in 6 out of the last 16 years, and rail cost increases have been above CPI in 13 out of the last 16 years for one or both transit operators. Oops. On April 8th, the ITALK was also presented with the draft audit report, including findings on transit operator eligibility, and asked to accept requests for exceptions from the transit operators. The result of the committee's discussion was to pass a motion recommending that the Board of Directors not approve these requests. The ITALK expressed concern at the frequency of operator noncompliance, which has increasingly resulted in eligibility requests being brought before the Board of Directors. While there have been discussions about amending the ordinance procedures, no formal action has been taken. The ITALK would like the Board of Directors to move forward with potential amendments to this section of the Transnet Ordinance. So I'll now turn it over to Susan Huntington to provide some background on the ordinance amendment discussions.
Good morning. I want to provide a brief context to where these potential ordinance amendments concepts are coming from, particularly as it relates to the transit operator eligibility and how this issue has evolved over time. So as Marcus mentioned, this issue was first formally identified in the fiscal year 2018 Transnet Triennial Performance Audit conducted by the Transnet ITALK. The audit recommended revisiting the operator cost ceiling tied to CPI to allow for more flexibility in managing reasonable cost increases while still maintaining the intent of ensuring fiscal discipline. At that time, several potential options were identified, including allowing a wider variance from CPI, setting a not to exceed threshold, permitting supported cost exclusions, or applying the requirement at the overall operator level rather than by mode. This issue was examined more closely by the Transnet Ordinance Amendment Subcommittee between 2022 and 2024. The subcommittee, just to bring us all back to that time, included representatives from all of SANDAG's member jurisdictions, along with transit operators, and was tasked with reviewing the ordinance and identifying areas for improvement. One of the first areas they looked into was transit operations and operator eligibility. As part of their review, the subcommittee explored and ultimately supported an alternative approach based on performance measures under California's Transportation Development Act. This would represent a shift from a cost containment model of the CPI to a performance-based framework and streamlines eligibility to state guidelines. This recommendation is one of several that have emerged from prior board and oversight processes, including the Transnet 10-year comprehensive review, as well as the 2018, 2021, and 2024 ITALK triennial performance audits. In addition to the update to the transit operator metrics, additional topics identified through these efforts included updates to the local streets and roads funding distribution, updates to the expenditure plan to align projects with the 2025 regional plan and current and future community needs, as well as the need for additional transit operations funding. So following the subcommittee work between 2022 and 2024, the intent was to align any potential ordinance amendments with the adoption of the 2025 regional plan. That approach would have allowed for a more comprehensive update, particularly to ensure consistency between the ordinance and any updated project scopes in the regional plan. So the strategy really was to bring forward a coordinated set of ordinance amendments rather than addressing items individually. We reintroduced the broader concept of potential ordinance amendments at the 2026 Board of Directors retreat, where there appeared to be increasing openness to considering amendments. So at its core, the CPI requirement is a cost constraint. It helps to ensure fiscal discipline, but it may not fully capture what we're trying to address here with the ordinance. The board does have flexibility, like Marcus said, within the current framework to grant exceptions on an annual basis. And in addition, the board can opt to amend the ordinance. This is not a lockbox provision, and the board can approve an amendment to the Transnet ordinance with a 2/3 vote. So I will turn it back to Marcus. Oh.
So we wanted to cover what happens if the board does not approve the funding eligibility request. Thank you. Given ITALK's recommendation and the change in the recommendation today. The Transnet ordinance limits the amount of funding for the transit operators, how much they can receive if the funding eligibility requirement is not met. Funding for MTS and NCTD would be limited to the 25 funding level plus an adjustment for CPI in the next year, so the current 26 fiscal year, if these were not approved. Based on our revised fiscal year 26 revenue estimates as approved in February, the estimated 26 funding levels are lower than the CPI adjusted maximum amount. So in 26, revenues are expected to increase by 2.63% compared to the 3.71% CPI growth. This means it is likely that not approving the request would have no effect on the allocations in 26. If revenue changed beyond what we are anticipating, there could be an impact. However, if the board did not take action, it would also result in uncured audit findings for the agencies. With that, we'd like to put up the revised recommendation slide to make sure that everyone's comfortable or aware of what is being recommended. The updated recommendation is for the Transportation Committee to recommend to the board approval of the funding eligibility requests for NCTD and MTS's bus services and not the MTS rail services. Also, based on ITALK's action, staff has added to the Transportation Committee recommendation to recommend the board begin discussions to amend this section of the Transnet ordinance. These requests are scheduled to go to the board for consideration next week. The results and any comments will be conveyed to the Transportation Committee and the ITALK. We also have representatives from MTS and NCTD available in person should the Transportation Committee have questions for them. And that concludes our presentation.
Thank you for the presentation. I would like to start with going to public comment.
Thank you, Chair. We have 2 public comments on this item. We'll start with Cesar Javier and then the original draft.
Within the context of what we see, experience in our community, because it was mentioned about local street, I couldn't fathom or even make an analysis when I asked the contractor, I mean the organic transportation implementer, how long will this pavement last? All dependent on the base of the street, and I would say conservatively 10 years. Wrong, because our observation is in less than 2 years, we see cracks. We see sinking portion of the local street. Except, of course, when we travel at La Jolla or this economically advantaged district, they have good roads. But I believe the calculation per meter or for whatever measurement is a standard. How come that the city is providing less on us and more on the hubs? Please teach us what to do, SANDAG. This is only about mobility and transportation. How much more on the 4 elements for human survival? The habitat, the shelter, society, and man. This is the challenge in our community, SANDAG. And I believe the city of San Diego should be here, being the show window. Where are they? Where is Councilor Rivera? Where is Vivian? Where is, forgive me, we are in search of
Thank you. Your time has expired. Our next speaker will be the original draw. You can go ahead.
There is no fiscal discipline. You guys are so disrespectful to the people because you literally you waste the people's money. And it's interesting because you're like, you come in and you change ordinances so that when people are out of compliance, all of a sudden they can be in compliance. You like reward non-compliance by going, oh, don't worry about it. We'll go ahead and come in here and fix it because of the unusual circumstances and external events that are beyond our control. BS, if you guys weren't mismanaging the money, if MTS didn't have, and there weren't buses that were empty, huge buses, accordion buses driving around with nobody in it. I mean, if you guys actually spent the money where it was supposed to be spent, you wouldn't have to go in here and, you know, continually make it so that you guys are in compliance. So it looks like you're doing a good thing. And then you like bring forward an item that if you don't pass it, right, then, oh, all this stuff, we're going to miss out on funding. Well, maybe you need to be because you guys can't manage our money wisely. For real, people are like literally going to have to sell their cars, move out of their homes because they can't afford it. They can barely afford to eat because it's so expensive. And it's like, you guys get billions of dollars to spend. And it's like, and look at the condition of the county and how well you're not doing what you are supposed to be doing. You should be making things easier for people, easier to get around. It should be like, oh my gosh, yeah, let's use public transit if we want, but we can also drive because the roads are in good condition. We could also, you know, walk around if we want. But instead, you guys are concentrated on changing people's behaviors, getting money all the time, reallocating it somewhere else, changing policies so that you guys stay in compliance. How about you actually spend our money wisely or you're not going to get any more?
That concludes the public comments.
Thank you. And thanks for the presentation again. Yeah, I think it's good to have this up there. So just for clarity, on this particular item, the Transportation Committee is making a recommendation. The recommendation ultimately goes to the board. It sounds like we have a recommendation from the ITOC, which was to deny the two requests. The recommendation from staff is now to approve it from NCTD, but to deny the MTS request. And so if I stated that correctly at this point, okay, great. Chair Rivera, I don't know if there's anything additional comments you wanted to add about the ITOC discussions.
Yes, I'd just like to say that at ITOC, we did have there's quite an extensive deliberation, and looking back at the history of the previous slide 5 showed that was a concern that we're looking at this differently. We also do understand that the cost increases over time, over a long period of time of fuel, insurance, and even the replacement parts for these vehicles, rail and bus, incrementally have eroded away the ability to keep up with the CPI because certain items are beyond the typical CPI increase. So that was the impetus that led the members to then take the recommendation, but also to ask that changes be considered by the Transportation Committee and the Board of Directors.
Okay, thanks for the comments on that. And just so for clarity, I mean, ITOC felt like the request was justified. This was more of a concern about the fact that it keeps repeating, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. And Mario, did you want to add something?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Totally agree with the conversation. And I think Susan touched upon it during the retreat. We had a conversation with the board members and PAC members who were there on the need, similar to SB 375 as I began my report, right? SB 375 has been on the books for 18 years. It's been good, but it needs a tune-up, right? So the Transnet ordinance probably also needs a tune-up, and we need to update some elements of it. And the board was open to that. So we're going to be approaching this conversation, and you, the TC, as well as ITOC, are going to be probably the backbone of this conversation on some ordinance amendments to be proposed to the board. we will take it in like a step progression, similar to Susan mentioned, those, let's call it the low-hanging fruit elements, but also some discussion elements. In the prior point that was brought up on point number 4, it was brought up about the 30% for maintenance usage for the cities. Do you all want to have a conversation? You know, this is a different world. Some costs are higher. Do you want to have that conversation if more of the Transnet dollars going to the locals should be for a little bit more for maintenance, or for your decision to call it of maintenance or capacity or improvement? So those are the things that need to be discussed. We also need to keep in mind, and not to put more into it, you know, the state requirements on clean energy is putting in a tremendous stress in our transit operators, not just on paying for replacement equipment at the normal price. They're dealing with equipment that's not that usual and that not easy to get, and this brings the cost up. So those are the discussions we need to have. We are in a different world from 18 years ago. So the approach is going to be bringing in, having a discussion at TC, at ITALK about the low-hanging fruit ordinance, the one that we're discussing on this item as well as other ones, and then proceeding to the lock boxes. And there's so many boxes in the Transnet ordinance that we probably need to go thinking a little bit in the concept of Transnet 1, right? Capital, local, O&M for the transit agencies. Let's simplify it and allow that flexibility for each of the local governments, the transit operators, as well as the ones doing the capital projects, to be able to be more nimble into that. That's going to be big discussions that are coming up here in TC at ITALK. So we're really embracing this recommendation from ITALK, this discussion here, taking it to heart, so that give us more of a reason why we need to move forward with what the board directed us to do during the retreat.
Thanks, Mario. I guess I have one additional clarification as well before we get into the discussion on the last item of the recommendation. It sounds like, Susan, you mentioned there's already been a subcommittee set up that operated on looking at this, and then we also had the discussion at the board retreat. So I'm a little unclear on how item number 4 is different than what's already occurred and what has been occurring. Is there something specific in there that staff was
No, it's just a matter of beginning the process to bring it forward. So the subcommittee met and agreed to changing CPI to TDA. There, within that subcommittee, there was 74% agreement with making that change. So that would just be something that we would want to start to bring forward. When the subcommittee was meeting between 2022 and 2024, there was reluctance on behalf of the board to make amendments. We had brought one amendment to the board in early 2023 that would have changed the selection process for ITALK, and ITALK brought that amendment, and ultimately it was voted down. So the idea was that the board was not open. There wasn't an openness at that time to doing amendments. So if we're ready to start that process going forward, then we would be able to do that based on the subcommittee's recommendation.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, as the committee members talk about it, I'd be interested to hear thoughts on what they think about that recommendation as well. But anybody interested in comments?
I will.
Okay, yes, go ahead, Councilmember Flynn.
Thank you. So I'm curious for, I guess, a little bit more detail from both MTS and NCTD as far as the reasons why the organizations haven't been able to be in compliance with this. Just like to drill down a little bit more into those. I'm guessing that to Mario's comments that some of this may have, some or maybe a lot of it may have to do with state mandates, but it's what I'd like to understand a little bit better here, if you would, please.
Yeah, appreciate that. I'm Mike Wygant, COO for San Diego Metropolitan Transit. As mentioned, both by the committee and then the staff and by Mario, is the inflationary numbers that we've all seen within our region are compounding on transit. It's a very specific industry. The amount in just wages alone to maintain the vehicles in this region has been very difficult to maintain, but the cost of the equipment, the cost of the parts associated maintaining a state of good repair has escalated way beyond what anybody would have imagined, especially, post-COVID per se. And if I may, I think for MTS, the staff's recommendation was going to be for both bus and rail, but then there is this recent discussion or development as associated to train hours or miles. I thought we were comfortable, but most recently we're not. We are definitely open to further discussions of that, of finding a solution so that we can still get not only your support for our request, but also to address the findings. But hopefully that answers some of your questions.
Yeah, and real quickly, I guess before we move on, when you talk about the price escalation, maintaining and parts and so on and so forth, has a lot of that got to do with the conversion from natural gas to electric and the electric infrastructure needed for that?
Yeah, I think that's twofold. From an industry perspective, we're slowly losing for a myriad of reasons, one of them being Buy America requirement. We're losing bus manufacturers. As recent as 10 years ago, we had somewhere between 7 and 8 bus manufacturers and somewhere between 8 and 10 rail providers. In the US currently, we're probably down to legitimately maybe 3 rail providers and 2 bus providers. They're struggling to get equipment in to manage the buses in a Buy America scenario. I will say that the mandate from California to move to zero emission has, in some cases, tripled our costs. For us specifically, we had a fairly robust CNG fleet. We're currently not getting CNG credits like we used to, which was a huge benefit to the agency. Our hydrogen cost, while we're building our liquid facility, and we have about 35, 38 hydrogen buses right now on the lot, we can only use about 15 at any given time because of the cost of the fuel. We were getting that initially at about $70 a kilogram in high pressure gas form. Right now we're down to about $30 a kilogram. When we get it in liquid form, when our station is complete, it'll be about $12 a kilogram. We were told initially that it would probably be somewhere in the $5 to $6 range. That is the highest type of fuel that we use in addition to our electric fleet. And we have about 10 electric buses in our fleet, and I believe you guys have a few as well. The cost of electricity is pretty high in California, and in the absence of anything that would help us guide with a public utility district on some type of a lower rate, which we're already experiencing blackouts and brownouts throughout, and I think the county and the state at periodic times, that's not a reliable fuel source for us. And it's difficult for us to have a conversation with our boards, which we do on a regular basis, which is in our quest to try to be what we want to be from a state and an agency perspective on a zero fuel front. It will cost us service hours on the street to try to cover that. And I think that's a very difficult place for us to sort of land in the grand scheme of things. Parts, we've seen anywhere from a 10 to 20% increase on tariffs recently. We think hopefully that'll back off a little bit as time goes on, but there's just not a lot of providers in the United States for some of the parts that we require for public transit.
Yeah. And just to follow up on that, MTS does not run hydrogen vehicles. We run electric vehicles, but almost per se to everything that Sean reported is very similar. The operating cost of charging a vehicle is much better for us compared to the hydrogen, but the components to keep a state of good repair of the vehicle, significant price increase compared to their ICE or internal combustion engine counterparts. And also the staff labor associated with maintaining the new technology. In general, when you look at total cost of ownership of zero emission vehicles, the capital cost associated with the transition for us is very impactful, but yes, there is operating impact costs too.
Thank you. And I'm not at all surprised by what you both had to say. And I guess I direct a question to Mario. When SANDAG is talking to Sacramento, is SANDAG sharing these concerns, these issues, these challenges that Sacramento is placing on organizations such as SANDAG and MTS and so forth?
Yes, yes, nutshell, we are. And a good example is Senate Bill 1087 that's reforming SB 375. Antoinette and her team just finished the RTP with the Sustainable Community Strategies. It was a document that cost us about $42 million to develop, that if we would had a lower threshold of requirements, it would be substantially less, and we could redirect those funding to other items. So it's a very robust conversation, but short answer is yes, we are bringing it up.
Thank you. Yeah, this kind of folds into an overall concern that I have. We talk in SANDAG, tell you we talk in the dais in City of Coronado. It happens at MTS. It happens, in all the organizations across our county about affordability. But yet we keep dealing with and adjusting to these regulations and desire for more regulations to go, greener and greener and greener, and at huge cost to not only our organizations, but to certainly, even more importantly, the citizens within our county. And, I struggle with continuing to adjust programs, adjust our method of, our method of compliance within different organizations and everything. It's a bit of a struggle for me to do that, knowing that basically what we're doing is continuing to head down that path of, and my concern about increasing the affordability challenge within our county. That's all I've got at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Mendoza.
Excuse me. I'm not sure who to direct this question to, but Ms. Trammell, you explained the implications if the board doesn't follow our recommendations, but what are the implications of us recommending that we not approve the request of MTS? I understand your the explanation of why. And is MTS going to have an opportunity before the board meeting to amend their request so that the board could consider it?
So the implications, as we discussed, we don't anticipate a financial impact on MTS if the board does not approve their request, because we don't anticipate that the revenue will be available to even get up to the prior year plus CPI adjusted amount. The finding would remain. So that's one consideration to keep in mind if the board does not approve the request. We have, since we identified the issue, we've been working with MTS. I think there has been some good explanations for the cost increases provided. We just have to make sure that we can come up with a calculation that would then pass the review by the auditors. And so that is not something you can do overnight. So we will continue to work with MTS. We're planning on taking this next week, so it's just a tight time frame. We do have 60 days from today before we finalize the audit, so there is some time to work through this.
Great. I sit on the MTS board also, so I'm just curious. And then, oh gosh, I think I had another question. Oh, regarding the with regard to MTS, remind me where we are in trying to walk back some of the costs of electrifying our fleets due to the operational difficulties we're having.
Sure. So as required through CARB and what's called the ICT or Innovative Clean Transit Rule, both our agencies are at a size where we're required to convert with originally with the governor's goal by 2040 to 100% zero emission. So in our cases, do away, the very small amount of diesel fleet, I think, maybe at NCTD, but for the most part, do away with natural gas and convert to battery electric or hydrogen. That's the two options. So that mandate's been in place since 2019. It's a purchasing mandate requiring you, as you buy vehicles each year as a state of good repair, a certain percentile of those purchases would be zero emission, starting in 23 at 25% and 50% at 26, and starting in 2029, 100%. So what we're working on is we've been part of the amendment that the ICT was actually an amendment of an old rule from the 90s called the Urban Fleet Rule. And we've been very active in trying to work through CTA, California Transit Association, and with CARB staff to make that manageable, but that's the regulation as is today. I'm actually on the Zero Emission Task Force for CARB, and they are now open to, because of this, they see the impact, and the real impact to MTS for that full transition is about $800 million compared to what we would have spent if we stayed on the internal combustion engine or CNGs. And so they now have realized that we've put us in a position where we would have to cut service or find other revenues, and this transition is not obtainable. So we have already asked for exemptions for, like, for instance, our paratransit fleet, and we continue, both Sharon, our CEO, and CTA, and with the ZEB task force next week, actually, we're meeting with them with some draft amendments to try to lessen that load. We don't disagree with the transition requirement long-term, but not at the cost of reducing service or degrading the integrity or the quality of service that we provide. It's counterintuitive. And the regulation has limitations in it or exceptions. We called them off-ramps for that. So right now we're working with them. We've already gotten an exemption for our para fleet, and we're working to try to amend the ICT, specifically the 50% rule that started the first of this year, realizing that's not obtainable. As some of the numbers that we've mentioned, especially with the hydrogen cost, that conversion is not sustainable. Long-term, the total cost of the transition when you use battery electric with the infrastructure, with the budget constraints that we have today, we can't continue this transition. So, and they are definitely open to it at this point. I think in a few months, we'll probably know how open they really are.
Yeah, go ahead, Mr. Perez.
So the question I have is, it looks like there was a subcommittee that looked to have an alternative to the CPI increase from 22 to 24. I'm just curious where that dropped off in implementation. Was it never implemented? Is that accurate?
There wasn't an appetite during that time for the board to make ordinance amendments. We are going through a journey where we're a staff, we're regaining trust and partnership with our board and with the public. And the board indicated at the last retreat that they're quite open to start bringing in a conversation of multiple ordinance changes. These ones are, I would call it, very low-hanging fruit. The data clearly indicates that the ordinance probably put in a requirement that today it's not really feasible or realistic, and it's not even aligned with other agencies. So I'm very confident. We just had a meeting before this one with our board leadership, and they're eagerly expecting some recommendations so they can put it in the agenda to have a robust discussion.
Okay, so the board recognizes the world has changed and are trying to adjust.
Yeah, for many things for SANDAG that will have to change. Like I said, even also the lock boxes of the major funding, we'll probably want to simplify them. We have agreements. We're going to be meeting with Mayor Gloria today, where we want to reopen the partnership agreement with the city of San Diego. We have other partnership agreements that probably need to have a tune-up after 2 decades.
Any other? Sorry, Councilmember Edson, did you want to say something?
Yes, I pushed the button, did it not?
We don't do the buttons. You got to wave at me.
Sorry about that.
Yeah.
I've been at the board too long.
Yep.
So I've sat on the SANDAG board and or transportation for over 9 years now. And for all of these years, there's been discussion around amending the ordinance to address the disconnect that we face on a pretty much annual basis here. And yeah, it causes some heartburn, right? And I understand the heartburn you're having, but from the transit agency side, I also know what the reality is for us. So I don't think it's fair to have the necessity for the transit agencies to pursue permitted exclusions. But right now, that's the situation we're in. And with that in mind, and for all the reasons that we heard and the costs noted by the transit agency staff members, I would be happy to make a motion if that's acceptable. Okay, so I move the Transportation Committee consider the Transnet funding eligibility requests of the Metropolitan Transit System and North County Transit District. Recommend the Board of Directors acting as the San Diego County Regional Transportation Commission approve the requests, and recommend that the Board of Directors begin discussions to amend the related section of the Transnet ordinance.
Okay, thank you. And so just for clarity, then your motion is the original recommendation as opposed to the modified recommendation.
Yes.
Okay. Is anybody wanting to second that? So any further discussion on, yes, go ahead, Mr. Perez.
So that motion was to approve the request of both agencies.
Right. Yes, sorry, into your mic. We can't hear you.
I'll second that.
Okay, so we do have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion on the motion as it stands right now? Yes, go ahead, Councilmember Fleming.
Yeah, I'll be voting against that. I would be in favor of the recommended actions that are in front of us under item number 5, as they've been adjusted from the original ones, but not to approve the original one, including MTS at this time.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so with the motion on the floor, I do have a question of staff. I mean, just again, for clarity, the staff's analysis as it stands right now is that the MTS request is not consistent with our ordinance policies, correct? Rules.
Correct.
The ordinance that was voted on by the people, correct?
Yes.
Okay,
because
thanks.
the ordinance specifies the calculation for rail service.
Okay, Mario, did you want to say something?
Yeah, you have to understand our position as staff. We cannot, as staff, recommend something that's outside the written ordinance. We morally think that this is a good discussion and the different recommendations are very valid. But so you understand we're coming as a staff, we have to abide with what's in writing right now. And we base our recommendations based on what's in the write-up in the current ordinances. But you're more than free to discern from the staff recommendation and move forward. We don't have issues with that either.
Okay, thanks.
So as a,
sorry,
through the chair,
yes.
May I ask a clarifying question?
Sure, go ahead.
Thank you. So each year, the transit agencies request exclusions for certain reasons. Has MTS not requested an exclusion for the rail portion?
Yeah, we did ask for an exclusion, and it really comes down to an issue of vehicle miles traveled versus hours with the train. And our deputy CFO is here, and he could explain it in more detail. But it has to do a lot with the orange line and the most recent change to the copper line, which was a separation for efficiencies for all of the public, and that's created kind of this deficiency as it relates to not being compliant with the original ordinance. And so we didn't find that out until late yesterday, that it wasn't an approach that they were not comfortable with. So as I mentioned earlier, we're open to further discussions to try to find a solution that could be supported not only by staff, but also by the committee. And to limit the finding per se. It's not going to change our costs, but it's really the formula of how you evaluate it.
Look, at the end of the day, mea culpa, we should have picked it up, the difference in wordings, and we didn't. And as Kim mentioned it, and take full responsibility of that. We have a snapshot right now of what are the ordinances in line and what we had. Is it a technicality? It's a technicality. Is there going to be a financial impact? We don't project one, but both proposals are very valid. I don't know if I have anything else that we want to say, Kim, about this.
Exactly what Mario just said. It really is kind of a technicality. And I think MTS has made a good case that the hours approach, it makes more sense for their operations, but the ordinance specifies that we're looking at revenue vehicle miles for rail service. So that's why we're saying it's not in compliance with the ordinance.
Yeah, go ahead, John.
So I maybe this is a question for legal, but is there a possibility, because we're dealing with, I do have concerns that obviously MTS was notified fairly late, and I understand the timelines for the next board meeting, right? And the question is whether or not the team can be able to process those requests and those calculations in time. Would it be possible to give the executive director the authority, if those calculations happen after that vote next week, to go ahead and kind of, I would almost say approve it conditionally, right? Assuming that those numbers could come in and that they could be verified by the executive director and the team, right? Because they may not make it in time to get those calculations done in that next week. I'm just trying to find a middle ground here.
Sure. And the question that's going to be before the board, they can exclude costs that weren't foreseen. And so it's a very factual question. So let's say, for example, that MTS wanted to exclude all its rail hours because some issue was not foreseen. Because it's such a factual question, it could be a hard thing for them to delegate to Mario, but we could work with MTS, and we are committed to working with them to find a way that this works within the ordinance.
Well, yeah, I would guess my point is, if there is a alternative calculation that factually would show that they would be in compliance after the fact, right? So you're not able to process those numbers within the next week, right, from SANDAG staff's perspective, but later on, you do find out, like 2 weeks later, that if they would have approached this in a different way, then factually they would have been in compliance. That seems to me like the kind of thing that absolutely could be delegated to an executive director.
They can definitely delegate it.
Okay, thanks. I guess, go ahead.
Another, I guess, question of clarification. Correct me if I'm wrong, but in my understanding of the action items that are recommended, the action items 2, 3, and 4 that are on the board, which have been adjusted from the original published items. If we went ahead and approved the action items that are currently before us, there is not expected to be any financial impact on MTS. And I'm assuming from the discussion that SANDAG and MTS then have time to go back and make the necessary adjustments and bring that back in the future for approval, so that it doesn't affect future revenue sources for MTS. Is that correct? Is that a correct assumption?
I think it is, Kim.
So I will say we have a 60-day window before the audit is finalized to cure the findings. So that is kind of the time constraint. This test is done annually. So if there's no financial impact to fiscal year 26, it would then be done again next year, and it could be cured. or we could be in the same boat. And I think that goes back to the ITALK recommendation of there's an exception requested regularly. And so that's why number 4 is recommending the discussion on amending the ordinance.
I think, thanks. And then just from that perspective on the clarity, the 60-day requirement is what drives this to be on next week's board meeting as opposed to the first one in May?
Some of it's scheduling, so that's something we can look at.
Right.
But it is, we have to get it to the board. We have to get the board approval within that 60 days. And then the audit report is finalized and then it goes back to ITALK for final approval.
Right. Okay. I mean, as has been said, I would strongly encourage us to be able to work through a path that allows them. I understand the challenges that we have with board agenda item scheduling right now, but it seems like we should be trying to make that work given that it was a late catch on our end. Challenge, we have a motion on the floor. I'm not sure anyone else. The challenge that I face with this is I don't like violating what our current directive says, particularly given the type of public comments that we get these days. I would have a much more difficult decision if they were suggesting there was likely notable impact to MTS in the upcoming year, but it sounds like that's not the case. So I'm likely not to support the motion myself. Seeing nobody else up at this point, I can go ahead and call for the vote on the motion, which was the original recommendation as opposed to the modified recommendation. Let's see where we end up.
That motion did not pass with 3 yeses and 4 nos.
So do we have somebody interested in making a different motion?
Yes, I would make a motion that we approve the recommendations, the revised recommendations that are before us. Those aren't up on the board right now, but I know those were items 2, 3, and 4 that were up on the board. That, yeah, I'd make a motion of that.
Okay. And
I'll second that.
second by Mendoza. And so this is the latest staff recommendation. Before I call for the vote, I will, I'm not going to ask for the motion to get changed, but I will make a comment that I'm slightly dissatisfied with number 4. I would like to see us actually say that there's a time on this, that we're going to actually bring back this conversation in the next fiscal year, just so provide that guidance, but it doesn't have to be part of the motion. With that, I'll call for the vote.
And that motion passes with 6 yeses and 1 no.
Great. And thanks for everybody's engagement. Councilmember Ritson.
Yes, and the reason I did vote yes was the comment you just made.
Okay.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay, great. Thanks. So with that, we will, thanks again, staff. I appreciate the clarity and the information in that discussion. It was a challenging topic to get through clearly. You did a good job. That will go on to item number 6, which is the San Diego Regional Vehicle Miles Travel Mitigation Study. This is a discussion item. It looks like we have Kirsten and Damon presenting this for us.
Good morning. My name is Kirsten Yucatel, and I am the project manager on the SANDAG side for the San Diego Regional VMT Mitigation Program. We partnered with the County of San Diego on this project, with the county actually taking the lead on the regular project management. And I am joined today by Damon Davis from the County of San Diego and Steve Cook from Intersecting Metrics, the county's consultant on this project. Just a bit of background before I turn it over to Steve. This project was funded by a Caltrans planning grant and an in-kind match from the county. It began in March of 2024 and is wrapping up at the end of this coming June. The goal of this project was to see if we could identify regional frameworks for mitigating VMT that would be suitable for our region. And to aid us in that effort, we convened a technical advisory committee comprised of representatives from the jurisdiction and fellow partner agencies. And their recommendations and input are included in what will be presented to you today. One final note, we are not alone in looking at regional solutions. Many other MPOs around the state are also trying to find regional avenues for mitigating VMT. And on that same landscape, the state has recently released its draft guidance for a statewide VMT program, which Steve will discuss a bit later. So with that, I'll turn it over to Steve.
Thank you. So the real role of the program, when SB 743 came into play in July 2020, it changed how transportation was analyzed. We went from level of service to VMT. And with that, we moved from 50 years of experience in developing standards and mitigation measures for level of service and moved to a metric that we were not used to. So the real purpose of this program is to provide tools for jurisdictions to help them with VMT mitigation and analysis. So with that, the first goal was to create a set of tools that jurisdictions could use to help mitigate VMT related impacts. To do that, you have to help fund local transportation infrastructure, such as bike lanes, transit, things like that. We also want to provide an organized database of VMT reducing infrastructure that can be used throughout the county so people have a better understanding of what's out there and how effective and expensive things are. We also want to create a framework for jurisdictions to exchange that. So I think as we've all kind of found, some jurisdictions have a lot of VMT reducing facility and capacity and others kind of lack for it. So if we can open up the communication between the jurisdictions to share some of these facilities, that's one of the main goals. And we can provide more infrastructure across the county. And then finally, it's to implement the sustainable community strategy and be SB 375 compliant. As Kirsten mentioned, we've worked with a technical advisory committee throughout this entire process to help select a preferred alternative, and that's what we'll present today. We came up with a hybrid alternative. And what it does, it kind of gets into 3 different areas of how we can mitigate VMT to provide a lot of coverage. And we look at both regional and local solutions so that jurisdictions can have control over how they implement VMT mitigation, and they can also work with the region to solve bigger problems. So first, we'll look at local in lieu fee guidelines. What we did with this program is we developed a set of guidelines that have a lot of information that would help jurisdictions set up their own localized VMT in lieu fee programs, their own mitigation fee program, so that they can mitigate VMT impacts locally. We provided methods and formulas on how they can calculate the fee rates. We provided an outline of a typical nexus study that they could use to basically fill in by numbers. We provided them the legal framework so that they have a good understanding of legally what's okay based on the Mitigation Fee Act and other case law to implement the program. And we also provided links and other example studies so that they can see what other jurisdictions have done successfully. So the program overview, how a local impact fee program works, is a project has a VMT related impact. They pay a fee to a local jurisdiction. The jurisdiction then builds VMT reducing infrastructure, which offsets that the impact of the new development. So now we'll talk about the 2 regional programs. And these are meant for either jurisdictions that may not, like I said, may not have the capacity to mitigate within their own jurisdiction through their own in lieu fee program, or jurisdictions that may have too much capacity that would be willing to share some of that. So how do we calculate VMT reductions? So jurisdictions would be responsible for identifying their own projects that they include within the program and determining the VMT reductions associated with it. However, to help kind of get everybody on the same page and make sure we're all using the same calculations, the program did develop a calculation tool that uses a SANDAG model that will help the jurisdictions determine the VMT reductions that would be associated with the infrastructure that would be included within the program. However, they're not limited to just those types of infrastructure that's in the calculator. They would be able to, jurisdictions would still have the opportunity to run their own calculations, have them peer reviewed by a different jurisdiction, and still use those within the program. These are the type of infrastructure that would be included within the calculator. However, the program would not be restricted just to this type of infrastructure. As I mentioned, there would be the flexibility of unique projects or unique infrastructure that can be proven through calculations that could also be included within the program. So first we'll talk about the exchange program. And how that would work is first, an implementing jurisdiction identifies a VMT reducing project, something within their CIP. They would then post that project to a centralized database that developers in other jurisdictions could see and review. And that would include the cost of the infrastructure as well as the VMT reductions associated with it. Then an impacted project would review that database, identify the infrastructure that they would need to build to offset their VMT related impacts. Nope, sorry, button's not working. There we go. And then once that infrastructure is identified, they would enter it into an MOU between the jurisdiction that has the infrastructure that needs to be built, the lead agency in which the impacting project is located, to basically come to terms on here's what we all agree on, here's the mitigation that we can use. The development then builds that infrastructure and they offset their impact and they move forward with their project. So infrastructure requirements, there are a couple of catches with the types of infrastructure that can be put in. It must be proven through accepted calculations that it is VMT reducing. We have to have some kind of proof that we can quantifiably reduce the VMT. The infrastructure must be permanent. And the reason why the infrastructure needs to be permanent is we don't know the lifespan of the project in which it's mitigating. So we need permanent infrastructure to ensure that the mitigation continues throughout the lifespan of that project. And then also the infrastructure must be shovel ready. And the reason why it needs to be shovel ready is development projects are going to rely on building this infrastructure and will probably be included within their CEQA documents. So it needs to go through the tried test of being designed, making sure that the feasibility is there, understanding is there going to be utility relocations and all these things, because once the project's approved and if the mitigation can't be built, then we're stuck in a situation where we'll have unmitigated impacts. So moving on to the credit program. The credit program would work as a jurisdiction would build the infrastructure themselves, whether it's through additional funding or something they have just within their budget. They would post the calculations, the VMT reductions associated with that infrastructure to the database, and in turn they would receive VMT reduction credit. So if you build a bike lane, that bike lane reduces VMT by 100 miles per day. You'll get 100 miles of VMT credit that you could then sell to developers. So basically, if you have 100 miles that you reduce through your own infrastructure projects, you can take that credit, sell it to developers to offset their VMT related impacts. Once those credits are sold, you tell the database and we'll keep the accounting for it so that there will be a long list of, there'll be a long list of facilities and basically the VMT reduction credits associated with it. So we can all kind of see what projects were built and what the VMT reductions were associated with those projects. The infrastructure requirements for this are similar to what it would be in the exchange program, but there's a little bit of extra bookkeeping that we need to do. So once again, it needs to be proven that the infrastructure built needs to reduce VMT. The infrastructure must be fully built before credits are received. The infrastructure must be permanent. The funding to use the infrastructure, though, it has to be from a source other than another mitigation program or something that or funding that wouldn't have occurred if not for the program. And this is kind of an additionality test. And so if the jurisdiction has a local VMT mitigation program, you can't claim credit for infrastructure that was built through that mitigation program, or even through, if you have a street front ordinance or something where a project is required to build out its street frontage and you build VMT reducing facilities through that, we can't claim credit for that because the program wasn't responsible for it. And then so we also have a couple of other things for additionality concerns. And what additionality is it's what I mentioned before, where for this to be mitigation, we have to show that this infrastructure wouldn't be built but for the program. So funds generated through the sales of credit can only be spent on other VMT reducing infrastructure. So we have to make sure that basically the funds that we get from the credits are basically paid forward and continue to use VMT reducing infrastructure. Participants in this program would need to have reporting similar to and consistent with the Mitigation Fee Act. The program administrator would need to review the program administrator will review these reports and make sure that the funds are being spent correctly. And if a jurisdiction does not spend those funds correctly or report the funds correctly, they would no longer be able to participate in the program. So we did present these reports to this program to the TAC, and we also presented reports that kind of detail how the program would work, and we did get feedback from them. So we did get feedback, and it basically was that they did request language to ensure that transportation projects as well as land use projects could participate in the program. So if you build a roadway and that induces travel, creates excess VMT, those projects would also be able to utilize the program. There was concerns expressed about the additionality of the credit program, which is kind of why we went back in and added a bunch of language and requirements to make sure we minimize additionality. There was request for further clarification about who would administer the project. And then finally, it was noted that the program, it was noted that when the program is in place, it will be difficult for projects to have unmitigated impacts within the region.
In addition to feedback from the TAC, we did bring this same presentation to the Regional Planning Committee and did get some feedback from them. Their feedback was largely focused on identifying whether there would be potential sources of funding to develop a pilot program, what could be achieved with any potential available funding, and really deferring a decision as to what any potential pilot program would look like until the available funding for that would be known. We did not bring to RPC what Steve will talk about next, which is AB 130, which is the statewide program, because that guidance hadn't been released at that time. So I'll turn that back over to Steve to go through the state's format for this.
Thanks. As Kirsten mentioned, the state of California is developing their own VMT mitigation fee program. It was part of Bill 130. And it focused on VMT mitigation through affordable housing. Our program currently does not include any affordable housing. It only focuses on transportation infrastructure, so there's really no conflict there. And the state program will not include any reductions associated with that. So as I mentioned, there's no conflicts. As Kirsten mentioned, the draft guidelines are provided on LCI's website if anybody wants to look at those. And the program needs to be in place based on AB 130 by July 1st, 2026.
So next steps, we are here hoping to get feedback from this committee on thoughts on what potential next steps might be appropriate. We are going to the County Board of Supervisors in June, and we'll be completing the assessment and releasing final drafts after receiving feedback by the end of this June. And just in addition, as the draft guidance receives comments and is finalized, we'll be monitoring that just to see how those are modified between now and then and when that program is finalized. So the sort of open questions that we have for this committee, and in addition to answering any questions or hearing concerns, are whether there's interest in looking further into a regional VMT mitigation program, if there are preferences or concerns or thoughts as to what format would be best, and whether anyone has identified additional concerns not covered in this presentation that would be germane to understanding prior to settling on any next steps.
Thanks for the presentation. We'll start by going to public comment.
Thank you. We have two public comments, Cesar Javier and then the original draw.
We are trying to cope up with learning from our thinkers, whom we expect bright ideas for the survivability of humans as far as moving them from point A to B. We look at this in the context of food blood flowing into the artery or vein. I think BMT is the blood pressure gadget to determine whether there is congestion in the passageway. The body is a perfect example of mobility, transportation of food blood to all points in our cells, in our body. Is that a correct?
Sure.
So BMT determines the impacts of our mobility transportation projects. and how to solve the impacts like congestion, heavy traffics is a challenge itself. Do we have to take what's your tablets? Probably amlodipine, aspirin, or something else. What we use is herbal, very effective. And perhaps we encourage people to walk. The 5 minutes, 15 minutes, 30 minutes urban planning. And it is being now done in France, Japan, and other great countries. Mobility.
Thank you very much. Your time has expired. Our next speaker will be the original draw. You can go ahead.
And talk about fraud, waste, and abuse. It is just so disrespectful, the things that you guys do to the people. This is all based off of fraud. Even Tara Lawson-Remer, who is the chair of the county, said that there's no way to really collect data that is showing that you're really mitigating vehicle miles traveled. So this is all based off of fraud. And you guys sit here and act like you can really determine that putting in a bike lane is going to save 100 vehicle miles traveled. I call bullshit. Because we have bike lanes to nowhere. Okay, we have bike lanes that people can't even, like, to the freeway. They're costing so much money. And you guys are attaching this to affordable housing. And this is what happens across the board in any local government, in your cities and in the county. You guys get in your own way, intentionally so. You impede the ability to actually provide housing for people. Because if you don't add this kind of infrastructure for it, then you can't build it. I mean, we have a crisis going on with humanity right now. And you guys are more concerned about vehicle miles traveled, getting people out of their cars, making it harder for anybody to travel, which is a God-given right for us to go from point A to point B. And you guys significantly impede that ability on a constant basis. And we have people on the streets, people that are set to lose their housing, set to lose their vehicles, can't even put food on the table for their kids. And you do this kind of nonsense? When are you going to care about the people over the planet? Because nothing you're doing is saving the planet, but what you are doing is you are putting people in dire straits. More and more, you guys encroach into our lives, and everything you do is based off of fraud, and it's fucking annoying as shit because people are suffering and you don't care.
That concludes the public comments on this item.
Any committee member comments or questions on this study or feedback or input? Yeah, Councilmember Mendoza.
Well, I actually have a lot of questions, but I'm not going to ask them all. Because I understand this is something that's being developed, but who would be the program administrator? What are you thinking along those lines?
There isn't really an identified program administrator. This would be an open question as to who would step into that role.
Okay.
That could be potentially SANDAG, potentially the county, potentially a third party.
Okay.
It would work with any of those people in that role.
Okay. Because the funds would go to the program administrator. Is that, or?
No, for an exchange, there wouldn't be funds running through any program administrator, right? That would be more just coordinating the exchange of projects, making sure that it was accurate, that it was up to date. And then it would be more decisions between jurisdictions with impacted projects and developers giving us that information, or a third party or the county or whomever. With the exchange, there is a credit. I mean, there is a credit element, a banking element that is managed. It's not sitting with the third party. It would be its own, sort of financial. And maybe Steve should speak more specifically to that, but it would not be held by the person who is the administrator.
Okay.
Right. With the credit program, the program would only identify the number of credits a jurisdiction has and how those credits were gained, and once they're spent, how they're spent. The jurisdiction themselves would be responsible for selling the credits and handling all of the financials of them. Okay. So it would never cross through the program.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions or comments? Yeah, Councilman Fleming.
Thank you. Included in your work and study, have you come up with any data on the impact on additional costs to development that this program will cost?
We have looked into it. It's really hard to say because VMT is so dynamic. So it depends on how, like, the impacts associated with VMT can vary widely within two projects that are a mile away from each other. So if a project's within a VMT efficient area or an area where there is already a lot of transportation infrastructure and ability to move around, it would have little to no impact on that project. If a project is located further out, it would have a very substantial one. So this is more of a tool, and it may not fit all uses, but it would just be a tool that could be used. And that's kind of why we provided the different layers. So if we wanted to have the local component to kind of give the local jurisdictions a little bit of control on how they manage impacts like that, but also provide regional resources as well.
I want to add to what Steve said, that this program would be entirely voluntary. So this is intended to be a resource for the region, not something compulsory, and something that would allow jurisdictions to decide how they want to participate, if they want to participate, if they wanted to have requirements that mitigation be exhausted within their jurisdiction first. There would be a lot of opportunity to be sure it was a good fit.
Thank you. Yeah, I guess just for some feedback from myself, I mentioned the word affordability earlier, and as I mentioned, it's talked about a lot. And each level of bureaucracy and each level of requirement that we add to development, there's a cost component to it, which certainly affects affordability, and whether it's housing, whether it's development of commercial and industrial property or projects. I travel around the country, travel around the world, and see a lot of construction cranes up, a lot of building going on and everything, a lot of home developments going on, much more so than I do in this area. And we certainly, I think, all know and all impacted by the cost of housing here, cost of living here, and the fact that jobs are leaving the area. So that would be my feedback, my concern, I guess, with the program that we really look at. I'm not totally opposed to bike lanes, for instance, but that we really look at what we're working on implementing and analyzing it from multiple lenses, including the lens of affordability and what the impact is going to have, not just on reducing vehicle miles traveled. Thank you.
I will say one of the savings, and this wouldn't be ubiquitous to all projects, but as I kind of mentioned, the projects with more of a minor VMT impact that can't currently be mitigated, the program would solve the issue. Is it might be able to kick them from an EIR into a negative declaration, which would have a lot of cost savings on the actual development of the project and allow the project to move forward much faster. And that's kind of that was one of the main purposes of this program, is to kind of remove some of that uncertainty and provide a path forward. It may not be a silver bullet that works across the board, but it could provide benefits to projects that are kind of within that line.
Thanks for sharing that. Thank you.
Yes, go ahead, Councilmember Dillard.
Hi, good morning. Thank you for the presentation. I just had two questions. One is there any other, is this tool used in any other state, and then the second question is, what's the difference between it going to the county instead of to SANDAG?
In regards to other states, there are no other programs in other states because California was the first to move from level of service to VMT. So other states don't have the same requirements that we do, so they haven't had the need for this type of program. They're still kind of using the old system that we used about 5 years ago. And as far, well, I'll let Kirsten.
And I'll add to Steve's answer that while there's not being used in other states, there are other MPOs. The other big four are looking at various versions of these programs, trying to understand whether there are regional solutions for VMT. that would be appropriate for their jurisdictions. Obviously, there's a big difference, as Steve pointed out, between areas where projects might be and the different MPOs and what regions they cover. So these are not going to be one size fits all, even among the big four. But it is a challenging area, and so there is a lot of effort underway trying to see what resources might make that easier. I think as far as to who would be the administrator of a program, I think that is, I don't think there would be a meaningful practical difference in how the program functioned. That is more a question of capacity and a desire to step into the role, and who would be the most comfortable administrator for jurisdictions participating.
Yeah, go ahead, Jennifer.
And you know, I was just curious too, is like the impetus for this because there are jurisdictions that are not using their VMT credits, and yet there's jurisdictions that need more credits.
The impetus was a couple of things. That was a major impetus, was to provide regional resources to allow jurisdictions to exactly share the capacity of VMT reducing infrastructure. But it was also, as I mentioned, VMT is a very new thing in the industry, and not a lot of jurisdictions have the resources to build these tools and to do the research and kind of be plugged in with this. And that was the other major part, was to provide clarity to jurisdictions on how you can mitigate VMT. A lot of jurisdictions throughout the state are struggling with the same thing. And as Kirsten mentioned, a lot of MPOs are looking at some of those kind of regional programs, and it's kind of all with the same goal, is how do we kind of tackle this thing? And how do we really get all on the same page? Because I mentioned before, with level of service, we had 50 years of research and we were all kind of on the same page. We haven't gotten there with VMT yet, and these are kind of one of those steps.
This is also the reason for having the local guidelines, so that it's not required to be regional. It's really intended to be a resource for jurisdictions at whatever level is appropriate for them.
Okay, thanks. Just a couple other comments on my part too. Thanks for the great presentation, but also the, I think one of the interesting parts is you mentioned that it would have to be offset with permanent infrastructure, but as one of my neighboring jurisdictions is proving, permanent infrastructure isn't necessarily permanent infrastructure these days. And so it would seem like we would have to make sure that, I don't know how this gets tracked over time. So if something gets built, how do you ensure that it actually stays there more than just a couple of years? Because again, permanent infrastructure isn't necessarily permanent. Is that something that's envisioned as part of the program?
Yeah, there is kind of wording in there that the program administrator, whoever it is, would make sure that the infrastructure is in place. I would also imagine that, and this would be up to the local jurisdiction, and part of the MOU process is if the infrastructure is removed for some reason, it is tied to a mitigation measure. So there would be additional sequel steps that jurisdiction would have to take to even remove that infrastructure. Yeah,
that would be my hope. I also think, just from the perspective of one of your questions about which form, it seems like again, most jurisdictions get to the point of having shovel-ready projects in the hope of doing it soon. And so it seems like it's more likely that a credit system would be more workable from the perspective of actually having something available when a developer needs to get some offsets, right? Because it's like, and at least in my town, we're not going to go through getting through final design and all of that stuff and just let it sit on a shelf for a while. We're going to be actively looking to get it done. And because it usually takes, as you're well aware, a lot of resources just to get to that point. So I think the credit approach would be more usable. And it does seem like an interesting concept. My main concern would be just to, it looks like it's closed. A lot of loopholes are closed, but make sure we're really analyzing the parameters around the program if it were created such that to avoid abuse. And just from the perspective of, it's like, I painted a couple lines on a road and now you get to go build 100 homes out in the rural county, right? So making sure that it doesn't get abused, that it actually does what it's supposed to say. I like the concept of having independent or third-party reviewers say that, yeah, this is a real project that's going to have real benefits. I think that's a key part, but just trying to make sure we're not having abuse. Because I think it's great. It's as we're all aware, it's much more difficult in rural areas to build VMT reducing infrastructure, and there's certainly plenty of cities that would love to have more infrastructure provided that would make an impact. So I do think there is some benefit that way. Thanks for the presentation. I don't see anybody else. Sorry?
So
Oh, sorry. Yes, sorry.
I just wanted to pile on you. You sparked my thinking on that comment about permanent. And Steve, you worked with the port before, and obviously we have restrictions from the state in terms of length on ground leases that we can do of 66 years, right? Which is, and so if there's a way to kind of, as you're thinking about permanence to address, because I could see something like this would be a tool that we might want to use, but that permanent thing always kind of hangs us up, right? Because of we're in the coastal zone and because of the state requirements. So just a thought.
Yeah, and that is a very good point. Something like 66 years, I think we're pretty comfortable. One of the state programs tackling this exact thing because it's using affordable housing, which has a 55-year deed restricted. So after that 55 years, it could convert. So there is research being done to like, is there a certain amount of time in which we can promise? And really what the permanent infrastructure is meant to is something that needs perpetual funding, I think is more of what we're trying to get away from, just because that funding source might go away.
Very good. Thank you. Anybody else? Oh, yes, Steve, go ahead.
Thanks. For those of us who live in the eastern part of the county, it's a big jurisdiction. And one of the concerns that I've had in the past, it was an air pollution thing. Yeah, you create the pollution locally, but you offset it somewhere else in the world. And I hope that the credit system, which I think is probably the best one, I agree, the credit system would focus the infrastructure near where the impact is going to occur. That seems logical, but it doesn't always happen in my experience.
Yeah, we have a little bit of language that in the guidelines, and that it's up to the jurisdiction to even decide where they accept credits from. So jurisdictions can choose, like if a development's coming in, they could set a policy that says, hey, you have to buy up all the local credits before you move to an adjacent jurisdiction, or you need to build all of the local projects within an exchange program before you go to an outside jurisdiction. And it would be up to the jurisdiction to prioritize, hey, you need to first do adjacent regions before you move out of our jurisdiction. So we didn't want to dictate that because we want to leave that up to the jurisdictions. It's really this is just a tool for them to use. So, and I would add that it's not really an either or with the credit program or the exchange program. The proposal is to do both, and it's to really allow jurisdictions to take credit for the infrastructure they're building. And maybe if something's not as much of a priority, they can put that on an exchange program and hope that a developer might build it as well. So it's kind of providing as many layers as possible to help the mitigation process.
Yeah, thanks for that clarification. I was just trying to address the second bullet on the screen. So since it was a question that was asked. Okay, anybody else? Seeing nobody else, thank you for the presentation. Thanks for the information. We are at the end of the meeting. The next Transportation Committee meeting is scheduled for Friday, May 15th at 9 a.m. We are adjourned. Thank you. Everyone have a good weekend.